people do a lot of atrocities too. Yeah, yeah. So we have to guard ourselves against that.
Yeah, even say Chenmayananji, he did. He said he can form an organization, but I'm not. My name is not going to be there in that. I don't want to be a part of that. So his aim was just to give the Gita and spread joy, but he didn't want to form organization.
True, true. In fact, he resisted a lot, but the
Yeah.
people who were his devotees, they felt that we don't do that, then the knowledge won't be spread. And I think that then he finally gave in. But it has been such amazing blessing because Chinmaya Missions also is growing. All the lot of spiritual organization after the person left keeps growing because the teachings are so wonderful and people have so much benefit from it that it keeps multiplying. That's what happens.
It is not the individual's desire, but if you are detached, then the desire is the one which is destined for you, what you are doing. You are destined to do that work.
Yeah,
That's why you are doing it.
but they don't get attached. And like our acharya used to say from Houston, he was actually like a regular job he had and everything. And someday I will tell you the story how we got into it. But basically, after he started the Chinmaya mission, and also one day he told Swamiji was still there, that, oh, what will happen to all this now? We built all this, but tomorrow, they don't donate or they don't want to come here. So he said, so what's the problem? Lock the door and go home. If people are not interested, don't bother. If they're interested, they will donate and they'll come. So he had such a clarity in his mind. है तो ठीक है, और अगर if nature doesn't want it, it won't happen. I mean, even this class, you can see that, all of us have that desire to study. So we are here. Through the pandemic, whatever, is still continuing the studies. So if you do your job, and whether you have it or not, don't get attached to that. That's what he's talking about. Okay. Next verse, 71. Vihaya kaman sarvan. Vihaya kamanya sarvan. Pumanscharati nispruhaha. Pumanscharati nispruhaha. Nirmamo nirhankaraha. Nirmamo nirhankaraha. Sashantimadigacchati. Sashantimadigacchati. Vihaya is abandoning. Kaman is desire. Yah is that. Sarvan is all. Puman is man. Man means humans. Charati moves about. Nispruhaha, free from longing. Nirmamaha, devoid of minus. जो हिंदी में वर्ड बोलते हैं ना, ममता, that's what it means. With feeling of ये मेरा है. Nirahankaraha, without egoism. So here nirahankar is more to do with doership. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Saha is he. Shantim, to peace. Adhigacchati, attains. So here he's going to talk about that, the state of this person, elaborate a little bit more, but he's going to talk about the cause of what should I say? He's going to talk about why we have desires, number one, and what is the difference between, again, the self-realized person versus the ordinary person. Ordinary person is constantly in the I-ness and my-ness. ये मेरा है और ये मेरी चीजें हैं, things like that. And so I-ness, my-ness is मेरी चीजें, or I-ness meaning ego. Ahankar means doership. I'm doing it, I'm doing that. That's what it means. And the person who is self-realized, he has no attachment, like Joe was saying, and he just feels complete. And because his understanding is at a subtler level, it is something that maybe ordinary people cannot understand. Hey, if I don't have attachment, if I don't have all these desire, why should I be working in the world? That's the first question, it comes up when you go on this path early on, that, how can I get the enthusiasm to work? But he gets the enthusiasm because he sees the whole world as his own. That's where he gets the enthusiasm. It's like our body. If our body has one part which is not functioning well, the whole body gears up to fix it. That's where his enthusiasm comes, you know. So that's the difference. And then another thing that he's going to discuss over here is he has no attachment to the things around him, even to the things that are bare minimum needed for the body. He actually doesn't. And you know, whoever has read biographies of all these Mahatmas, from our perspective, it looks totally shocking, but there are hundreds of those Mahatmas in the Himalayas. The only thing they have is their dhoti and some kamandalu, maybe something. They don't have any food bank that they have a fixed one. They just wander, and they have so much faith in the Bhagwan that and it gets provided to them. Somebody will come and feed them. Somebody will give them whatever minimum they need. It is done. We cannot fathom that, because हम लोग को कभी भी travel करना होता है ना, तो हम लोग की बैग देखनी चाहिए क्या क्या भर के लेके जाते हैं हम लोग. And then we always worry about, hey, in that country, can I find this or can I find that? These people have like so detached, and it's possible because we have seen those, you know. And then Chinmayananji's guru, Tapovan Maharaj, he had two gurus actually. Tapovan Maharaj was the one that he finally, you know, got his entire knowledge and all that. He was a wanderer. He did not have any possession. And there is a book called Wandering in Himalayas. So he went, I think 2 or 3 times he did the whole chakkar of the Himalaya. And then उनमें उन्होंने लिखा है, तो एक जगह उन्होंने लिखा है कि there was like, he was so hungry, he was so tired, and he said, okay, Bhagwan, now I want to see how you're going to bring me the food over here. You know, you are the one who gives this ant also, who is in a little patthar, you give him. And then he said, within like 15-20 minutes, there was a guy came with some khana. And he said, oh, I had cooked this food, and somebody was supposed to come, and I don't remember the exact story, he got fed. And, you know, Yogananda ji ka to bahut famous hai sara. Whoever has read the autobiography of Yogi, early on he challenged his brother that, you know, God takes care. And the brother said, who said the God takes care? So he said, okay, I'll show you. You going to come with me? We will not take a single paisa, no money, no nothing, and we will take this trip. And then he takes the trip, and then that's where everything was slowly, all the problem got solved. They got fed, they got the ticket, they got this, they got that, everything was given to them. But somebody has to have that level of faith. So they are saying that these people, they don't have any possessions, unnecessary possessions, and the minimum also that they have, they are not attached to it. Exactly opposite of what we do, you know. And then they obviously they don't have the doership, but we have both. We have attachment to the possession and we have the doership. And they know when it comes to doership, they are very aware of that everything is done by nature. You know, our mind, body, intellect has its own rhythm and it goes, but I am the witness. I am above it. Whereas we have the hard time, you know, becoming the witness of it. Because we think that if I don't do something, it's not going to happen and all that kind of doership. And the ego ka example, I think last time Joe gave that very good example, कि वो मक्खी behind some kind of a cart thinks that I am moving the cart, right? That's what you said. Joe said. धूल उठा रही हूँ. तो एक example स्वामी जी ने, चिन्मयानंद जी ने दिया कि हम लोग ने ना, what ego is, because हम लोग को समझ में नहीं आता है कि भाई ego है क्या चीज़. So he said कि समझो कोई एक बंदा ना नदी के किनारे बैठा हुआ है और उसने अपने पाँव नदी में डाल दिए और वो पाँव हिला रहा है पाँव. धीरे धीरे उसको ऐसी भ्रम होने लगता है कि मेरे पाँव हिलाने से ना नदी बह रही है. You know how stupid it sounds, right? That's what ego is. That we think that, oh my God, even parents think that, oh, मैं नहीं होगा तो बच्चों का क्या होगा? You know, and our teacher used to say, your children will be better off, maybe. I mean, just jokes. But basically, she said, don't worry. They have come with their own prarabdha and everything, and so you are not like, oh, without me, what is going to happen? So ordinary person just lives in that egocentric ways, but these people know it, that and the reason the person gets peace is because he does not have those two things. So the peace is a direct result of not having the ego and not being attached to the possession. So that's what this verse is going to tell us in a nutshell, and then we can read Swamiji's commentary. Did I do the Sanskrit already? I forgot.
Yes, we did the Sanskrit.
Okay, we did the Sanskrit. Okay, so who's going to read? Sushil ji, you want to read?
That man attains peace, who, abandoning all desires, moves about without longing, without the sense of I-ness and my-ness. There are commentators who believe that this and the following stanza explain the path of renunciation, which is in fact not altogether ignored in the text of the Gita. Since, as we said earlier, the second chapter is almost a summary of the entire divine song, it has to indicate even this sannyas yoga, which will be explained later on at length and hinted at different places during the entire length of Gita.
So he's just talking about that because chapter 2 is a summary, these last two verses are kind of hinting at the sannyas yoga, but Krishna Bhagwan's take on word sannyas is very different, and we will see as we go along.
This stanza seems to ring clearly the significant advice given earlier by Krishna, almost at the very opening of his philosophical discussions. In this chapter, he had advised therein, having conquered the mental agitations that were created by the pairs of opposites, fight the battle of life. The same idea seems to be restated here at the close of the chapter.
So we know what it means, like, pair of opposite. We have gone through it in very much detail, Okay, go ahead.
The first line of stanza explains the mental condition of the one who comes to discover real peace within himself. Such an individual, it says, renounces all desires and has no attachments or longings. The second line describes the condition of such an individual's intellect, and it asserts that it is without any sense of I-ness or my-ness. The ego is the cause of the sense attachments and longings. Where the ego is not perceptible, as in sleep, there are no longings or desires in the individual, or at least they are dormant. Thus, if the first line of the stanza is describing a negation of the effects of ignorance, the second line asserts the absence of the very cause from which desires and agitations arise.
So he's just talking about that. He's giving a further explanation कि यहाँ पर दो part है इसमें. एक में उन्होंने बोला है कि he attains peace who abandons all desire and moves about without longing. So that is his, mental state, the lower mind, and the higher mind is the reason that happens is because he has no ego and no sense of attachment, and that is at a deeper level, at his intellect level. So that's what counts the most. That if at the intellect level you have no attachment and you don't have that doership, then you are peace, you are free, and then whatever Joe was saying, that कुछ आया उसको enjoy करेगा वो, और जो नहीं आया तो उसको disturb नहीं होएगा. In fact, in our study group we used to discuss this कि a true yogi, sannyasi, or a man of wisdom is only one who enjoys the world to the maximum, because we are always fearful and afraid and this and that. He is relaxed, that's why he enjoys it a lot more than even us. And उनको देखो कभी कभी वो म्यूजिक भी होता है तो वो झूमेंगे म्यूजिक में भी, सब कुछ करेंगे वो, because they are so relaxed, Okay.
Earlier in the introduction, we explained that the split in personality of Arjuna was caused by the intervention of the sense of his ego and his egoistic desires, which broke up the subjective and objective aspects of his mind into two independent islands with a vast ocean of surging waves of desires between them. With a soft suggestion, after explaining all the logic of thought, Krishna is carefully placing his finger upon the very ulcer in the Pandava's mind.
So here he's talking about, in the beginning of the chapter, he has given that objective and subjective mind. I will not go into it. Basically, he's telling you that Arjun का जो whole depression जो उसको हुआ, dejection जो भी हुआ, वो उसके मन में जो ये जो desires उत्पन्न हो गई ना, उसकी वजह से हुआ है. It created a drift between his subjective and objective mind. That's what, and this is what happens to us also. So he's just saying that जितनी कम उसमें desire होएंगी, उतना peace हमको मिलेगी, and then our job will come out the best. That's what he's saying.
The stanza in its sum total advises us that all our sufferings in the world are caused by our own egocentric misconception and the consequent arrogance, which is characterized by our multiplying demands for wealth and our endless desires.
So we have already discussed that what can happen with this endless desires.
Sannyasa means sacrifice, and to live in a spirit of sacrifice after renouncing completely one's ego and its desires is true sannyasa, wherein an individual comes to live in constant awareness of his fuller and ampler divinity. The general misunderstanding that to run away from life is sannyasa, or to color the cloth is to become a true monk, has cast an irreparable slur on the philosophy of the Upanishads. Hinduism considers him alone to be a sannyasin who has learned the art of living his life in constant inspiration, which is gained through an intelligent renunciation of his egocentric misconceptions.
So he's just telling you that a sannyasi is not who just wears those orange clothes, and there could be a sannyasi who's wearing a three-piece suit also. That's what it is, that he could be a complete sannyasi from his mind, and a guy who's wearing a ochre color cloth, he's gonna be totally क्या बोलते हैं, worldly person, but he's just maybe pretending that. So true sannyas is something with your own in your own mind and intellect. When you have that detachment, you're a sannyasi. If you don't have detachment, you're not. It's a very simple definition by Krishna Bhagwan.
Shankara beautifully explains this point of view in his commentary on the stanza. The man of renunciation, who, after entirely abandoning all desires, goes through life being content with the bare necessities of life, who regards not as his even those things which are needed for mere bodily existence, who is not vain of knowledge, such a man of steady knowledge, who knows Brahman, attains peace, nirvana, the end of all misery of mundane existence, samsara. In short, he becomes the very Brahman himself.
So now it's a final. Chapter 2 is coming to a conclusion. So here Shankaracharya ji's commentary, which most of the Advaiti people they very seriously they read his. Shankaracharya ji was Gaudapad ji's chele ke chele the wo. So there are 2 points he brought over here. One is we already discussed it. Even the things needed for his mere bodily existence, he's renounced. That means he doesn't kind of have attachment to it. So that's what, and we already discussed. I told you all the Mahatmas, what they do. And the second one is he was not vain in his knowledge. Because there's another problem comes, ahankar, meri gyan ka ahankar nahi hai unme, And about the necessity of life and all that, I will tell you this incident from Swami Chinmayananda ji's life. So after he finished his studies and, got his realization and all that, he got this urge to come and teach this to the rest of the world. So he needed his guru's permission. And that famous story I told you, he said, ki koi teri sunega nahi. So he said, okay, if 3 people listen, then you can continue and all that. But there was another piece of the puzzle before that. He told him, when first time he went to him, he said, you really want to do this? So for, I don't know exactly the length of time, 1 year or 2 years, you have to go wander in India and live on bhiksha. You know, bhiksha means you don't cook, you just go and ask for. And you know, Swamiji was from a well-to-do family. So imagine agar humko bhik mangni pade kisi se. But that is necessary to go through that, to live in this detachment, number one, and to break your ego. Both of them get, and it is the hardest thing to do. But before he gave him permission to go teach others, he had to go to it. And if you read any of the Mahatma's biography, you will see that component in them. That you live, you have a complete trust in God, and sometimes they have to face abuse of people. Koi gali bhi dega unko. Hatta katta hoke bhik mang raha hai ye wo. There are people who will say cruel things to you. You will do everything. They're not supposed to get disturbed. If they can handle all of that, then they have unka nirahankar ho gaye hain wo, और possession से उनका छूट गया है मोह. फिर they are worthy of teaching this Vedanta. So they actually made them go through that, which was quite amazing, you know.
Even Vivekananda set up this rule for the Swamis that for 1 week they have to mango bhik. और उसके rules थे, you go after the lunch is over, stand there, don't say a word. If you don't get it, move to the next house and never ask. If you don't get it, you don't get it.
Wow. Yeah. See? So, it's true. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So this is what it is. Anybody has any comment?
Yeah, I want to give the example of my guru, Swami Hariharji. So his guru had advised him when he was 18 years old to give up. He gave up water and salt and cereals, you know, anaj. And he went to the Himalayas. So and he never had any of those things. He lived his whole life without that until the age of 101.
Wow. Very interesting. Yeah, their renunciation is like beyond our comprehension, isn't it? Beyond our comprehension.
I mean, we can't even imagine living without water.
Right, right.
But he used to, you know, he used to stay with us. He used to stay with, devotees when he was traveling. And we saw it all. He never had water. We never put salt in his food. And all he had was vegetables, fruit, and little nuts. And so that's called, as you said, control over, you know, the necessities.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it very easy to be in the Himalayas because you're not, sometimes you don't have to, you know, you don't find water maybe.
I mean, to me, you know, it was like one of the Swamis here who lives in Santa Barbara. I forgot his name. He has an ashram in the Santa Barbara, and he used to come to Houston, and we used to have some satsang. And sometime when there was a smaller group, people used to ask all type of questions because he loves to live in Himalayas too, but he wants, you know, his calling is to teach people, so that's why he's here. So he was talking about he used to go and do penance on the Himalayas, and they don't wear any special clothes on the Himalayas. And I have been to the Himalayas, so I know how cold it is. Even in the summer, you need, you know, warm clothes. But they will just wear their little dhoti or whatever. They have their top is bare and all that. But somehow the nature, if they are on this path, their body changes and all that. And they said, so if you're sitting like on a Himalayas, who brings you food? So he said, you really want to know what happens sometimes? He said that they are in meditation and they keep the katora like that. They have one katora. He's saying a goat will come and drop the milk in there. Can you believe? I was like shocked when. So means the nature really does. Bhagwan will send the goat. And he's saying that sometimes it will freeze over there because they are not ready to eat yet. But it's there for them. If they get hungry, the katore mein doodh hai. And we were just looked at like, oh my God, हम लोग सोच भी नहीं सकते ऐसा. पर अगर उनकी बातें सुनो तो मालूम पड़ता है कि how they live. You know, and they are not worried. And they said, oh, how do you take a shower there? Somebody asked. So they said, they have some kind of yogic kriya. They can create so much heat in their body. वो ऐसे पसीना आके वो नहा लेते हैं. हम लोग because he won't talk about these things to everybody, but because there was a small group and he was in the mood to eat, so he told a few things. He's saying that's how we cleanse the body. So they have their whole system. Once you reach that stage, they learn it from their gurus and all that, how to do, what to do, and they know how to survive without anything because they are on that path. So for our sake, obviously we cannot do all that. The best thing we can do is reduce our desires, don't get hung on to things, don't worry too much. I think that is our path. What is my take home message over here? That's what it is, for us. Any other comment before we go? Okay, we can go to our, let's see the time. Yeah, we can do. And at 12:30 we'll close the class, and then whoever wants to stay and discuss free will and all that, we can do that. Om Bhadram Karnebi Shrunyam Devaha Bhadram Pashye Makshbhiryajatraha Stirai Range Sushtu Vagam Sastanubhi Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swastina Indro Vitashabhaha Swastina Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastina Staksharyo Arishta Nemihi Swastino Bruhaspatir Tadatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Narayanam Padbhuvam Vasishtam Shaktincha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padma Padam Chahasta Malakancha Shishyam Tam Trotakam Vartika Karya Manyan Asmad Gurun Santata Manatosmi Asmad Gurun Santata Manatosmi. Okay, so we are going to start with 95. So 94 was the one we discussed. Usme word kripan tha, remember, kanjus. Like if we miss, making use of our this life to get self-realization, then we are unfortunate and narrow-minded. That was a conclusion in the last one. So we all should make effort towards that. So the next one now. So now remember, this is coming to an end. So whatever he's talking about it's almost the essence of the entire book. And all these concepts in detail have been described before. But I know some of you joined much later. But since we are studying Bhagavad Gita and we did chapter 2, in that all the aspects were there. So we got lucky that we can still relate to this. Otherwise, sometimes some of the concept may sound like a little outlandish. But I think that our class is doing pretty good with this. So I think we can go ahead. Ajay samye tu ye kaschita. Ajay samye tu ye kaschita. Bhavishyanti sunishtitaha. Bhavishyanti sunishtitaha. Tehi loke mahagnanaha. Tehi loke mahagnanaha. Tachaloko nagahate. Tachaloko nagahate. Ajay is unborn. Birthless is, Ajay, unborn, birthless. Both meaning. Samye, ever the same or uniform. Tu, on the other hand, ye kechit, those who, bhavishyanti, will become, or who are, sunishtitaha, firm in their conviction. So now here when you talk about firm in the conviction, think about the man of steady wisdom. So how it correlates to it. Te, they, he indeed, loke, in this world, maha jnanaha, people of highest wisdom. Tata, that, means that reality, means that substratum, that consciousness. Loka cha, ordinary men, however, na gahate, cannot understand. So all he's saying about over here is that those people are the highest wisdom who have this firm conviction of the self, which is unborn and ever same at the same time. But ordinary people cannot understand this because they always live in the duality. हम लोग कितना भी सुन लेना फिर हम लोग फिर वही प्रश्न पूछेंगे, yeah but see, that's what happens to us, which is okay at our stage, because Bhagavad Gita has all the answers, so we don't need to get disturbed about it, that hey, if I have a question, it's okay to have a question because we are at that stage. But he's just saying the difference, that those people have absolutely no doubt about it, number one, and everything that they do in life comes from that knowledge. If we look at our own life, sometimes we will behave as though we have that knowledge, but many times we don't behave. So we are not firm in it. That's the difference between them and us. And that was one thing. And the second thing, okay, let's read it and then we maybe open up more. Meeraji, you have the book, right?
In this world, they alone are said to be of the highest wisdom, who are firm in their conviction of the self, which is unborn and ever the same. Ordinary men cannot understand that reality. Everyone born as a biped has an innate right to claim his heritage, the godhood. He is only called upon to surrender his entire egocentric false notions about himself and raise himself to the higher spiritual domains where he is the self-crowned monarch.
So I want to say something over here before you go further, because I thought about something. In the South Indian temples, they have a ritual, and I think they do it here at the Hare Krishna too sometimes. When you go there to do your namaskar, they bring a silver topi and they put on your head. Has anybody experienced that? When you go, you have, Sheila ji has, right? So I didn't know what that ritual was. Our teacher told us what that ritual was.
Yeah.
You remember it, Joginder?
No, I don't know. I just heard first time that they are crowning us.
Yeah, they're crowning us, but what is the symbolism behind it? Okay, hey, you have dropped your ego, you have come, you are bending your head, and now you have become the king of the world. Because you feel like a king. Because all your desire, हम लोग सब छोड़ के आते हैं ना, मंदिर में आते हैं, supposedly, बाद में कोई लेके आए तो we don't know. True मंदिर में वही आता है ना, सर झुकाने के लिए. कि भाई, तेरी मर्जी, मेरी मर्जी कुछ नहीं. जो भक्त होता है वो तो यही बोलेगा. When we say free will, think about it. A true भक्त will say, मेरी तो मर्जी है ही नहीं इस दुनिया में. तेरी मर्जी काम करेगी. तो free will कहाँ से आगे फिर? Whichever way you look at it. So basically, that's what that. So he said that he's the self-crowned monarch because he's already become the king of the world by renouncing everything. That's what it is.
In this declaration of the rishis, they do not make any reservations at all. It is only for the purpose of raising an ordinary individual slowly and steadily towards the necessary conditionings that we have in our Shastras, the classification of mankind into varnas and ashrams.
So I want to stop here for a second because varnas means I don't even like to use this word, but everybody is familiar with the word. The caste system is the varna vyavastha. Actual word is varna vyavastha. So usme wo, Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya and Brahmin, that's called varna vyavastha. And the ashrama is the 4 stages of life. Meaning you have brahmacharya, first 25 years you're studying and things like that. Then the second life is gruhastha. From 25 to 50, supposed to be, all the worldly things, having children, having a household, whatever. And then comes vanaprastha, which is like, this is not like in a box, okay, these years, but basically if you assume that somebody has a life of 100 years, that's why they have divided. Depends on each individual. So the third one is vanaprastha, means withdrawal. Withdrawal, in olden days they used to actually go to the jungles. Now we don't have a system to go. So in our own home we start withdrawing from 50 to 75, and sannyasa is 75 onwards, you complete detachment. And then किसी ने बोला घर में बैठ के कैसे करें हम लोग संन्यास. So is there you just don't meddle in your children's life. That's called sannyasa. Let them now, you have taught them everything, to let them do. Don't go there, oh, you should do like this, you should do like that. Drop that. And then if you drop that, then you'll have time for Bhagavad Gita class. So I'm just telling you, basically, I'm not saying that the Rishi Munis are saying it. So they have classified them just to give us a tool to go on this path. That okay, you have desires, you have a time, 25 years, go fulfill your desire, but after that start withdrawing and go to sannyasa. Basically just a tool. So those are the two terms here. That's what it is.
But in the literature of Upanishad, there is no condemnation debarring an individual to enter and achieve his own real nature based upon the accident of his birth or chances of his association or the state of his age, sex, or class. Even women have equal right and chance to this highest experience of reality. They are not barred in any sense of the term. It is only in the days prior to the Upanishads that we find in the literatures there is a general condemnation of women, but in the later times of Upanishads, we have a general acclamation upon the sagacity and spiritual dynamism of the female kind.
So I just want to bring a little bit history here of Chinmayanandaji's. He was not from the Brahmin family. So when he started giving the discourses, he had a huge opposition from the Brahmins. And I don't know all the rules and regulations, but lot of places, only certain pundits can give the discourses on Vedanta. That there were so many rules before that. All this, revolutionary people, just Vivekananda, Chinmayanandaji, they said it's for everybody. So he's just saying that वो जो old India में जो rules बनाए थे ना, वो सब उसका काफी रूप बिगड़ गया था. There was a whole reason that all these Varna ashram and these things, and we know that like Varna Vyavastha is more to do with your mind. Are you ready for it or not? But it had become very ugly that, hey, only Brahmins can say it. But in our own history, we see so many saints and sages were from the scheduled caste and all that. They didn't even know, like somebody like Kabir, they didn't know they didn't even know he was a Muslim or Hindu, right? He became the greatest saint. Guru Nanak Ji was from a Vaishya family. They were doing business. He became the greatest saint. So, और अगर कृष्ण भगवान को देखे तो गैया चराते थे. He was not a king and all in the beginning. So he's just saying that everybody who is born as a human has a chance, has a right, and your age, no discrimination, no bar. Anybody can go towards this knowledge. That's what he's saying. And the one who actually gets this knowledge, he can become established in it.
The rishis have gone to the extent of giving such an equal status for women that definite portions of even the literature of the Upanishads are declaration to and from the greatest self-realized women of this country. Sri Gaudapad emphasizes this large-hearted concept of the Hindu culture when he says that whoever comes to experience the reality has reached the goal of life. But the ordinary man in the street cannot and will not understand the perfections reached by the God-men, the Jnani, because unlike yogins, he will not care to stoop down to play the tamasha display of jugglery on the stage of life. He shows no siddhis, no supernatural magic or fantastic feats of achievement.
So he's just telling you that the person, what the self-realized person they're talking about in this particular context can be anyone, and he sometimes you don't know person next to you could be. And I love reading biography of people and all that, or sometimes when other people tell me their experiences and all that. And there was a friend of ours, he's a professor there in Pune, and he's on the spiritual path, and he actually went to the Himalayas because he was like, he had this such a strong urge to get this path, go to this path. So he actually dropped everything and went for a while. And then, when you go to the Himalayas and all that, you sometimes, there are people you meet who are like Trikaldarshi type of people, and the God is helping you too, because he was probably so genuine in his search. So he said after he dropped everything and went to the Himalayas and he reached some peak, and there was one sadhu said, "यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो?" तो बोला, मैं तो सेल्फ रियलाइजेशन के खोज में ढूंढ रहा हूँ. तो बोला, वो तुमको जो देने वाला है वो तो तुम्हारे घर के पास बैठा हुआ है. So he said he was so shocked. So then there was some businessman near his house. He became his guru finally. So he said, उसने मेरे को वापस भेजा. Go and do your professorship, do everything, and he is going to teach you how to do this. So it was an amazing story. This is a true story, And many times that's what happens, that they don't have any fixed way that it is, but they are so established that they are self-realized themselves, and they can bring somebody else to, lift them up too. And here he's talking about, this tamasha and jugglery and all. People get very, very fascinated by it. कोई एक बाबा जी बोलेंगे कि वो चमत्कार करता है, हजारों लोग चले जाएंगे उसके पास. And if you say, oh, that Nisarg Datta Maharaj was a beedi बेचते थे वो, right? A lot of us, that he wrote that book. So in the beginning, nobody kind of knew it, but once it got revealed that he was a self-realized, he continued to sell the beedi or something. I don't know the 100% of it, but I know. And a lot of times I have heard that they were businessmen. There was one lady, Niruma. Anybody knows who Niruma is? Now she's no more. She took a Mahasamadhi already. She was a Jain saint. And she used to come on TV, so I used to listen. And she actually came to Houston also one time. And she used to be a doctor. And then she became like a, renunciate. And then she was giving discourses and all that. She said that her guru was a businessman in Houston. I'm sorry, not Houston, in Mumbai. So he had a regular business and all that, but he was a self-realized soul, and he would daytime he would do all that, his business, and then in the evening he would have all these people to teach them how to go in this path. So it is amazing that if you hear all these stories, you will realize that there's no bar of any kind that you have to be a certain type to be. You can look like totally normal, and you can be totally established in your mind and intellect and everything. So I think that's what he's talking about over here. Any comment?
There is one example of Nisarg Datta Maharaj.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of him.
वही मैं बोल रही थी ना, बीडी वाले, right?
He was a businessman.
Yeah. And I think he wrote the book I Am That.
And that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's whoever's
Very
it.
good to read.
There are, and even Ramanna Maharishi. Everybody's heard of Ramanna Maharishi, right?
Who am I? Yeah.
Who am I? So I am that, who am I? See, they are Mahavakyas, all these things. So there was a gentleman from England who, I don't remember his name now. I think he wrote a book called Search in Secret India. He's the one who discovered Ramanna Maharishi. And he made him popular, because Ramanna Maharishi's story, if you read, when he was, about 14 years old, something, he left home. And then he went to the Arunachal mountain. And then he never left that place.
Yes.
He never left that place. So the way the story goes, that this person, I will, if somebody's interested, I will send that information. It's a fascinating book. So this person from England in his early 30s or something like that, 19th century, he was interested in spirituality. So anybody who's interested in the Western world, truly they run to India. Okay, so he goes there, and then over there he's because he doesn't know what to look for. So he said anybody gave him any tip कि भाई फलाना spiritual है, वो जाता था वहाँ पे. कई बार वो ढोंगी निकलते थे पूरे. Okay, तो भी वो जाता था just because he wanted to find out. So he, because of that daredevil attitude of his, he came across so many people. There were dhongis, there were siddhas who had like achieved siddhis, like this one guy could create any kind of fragrance, you know, and things like that, or move the objects with just by looking at them, ye wo sab kuch. And then they said कि he went and किसी ने बोला कि वो एक साधु बैठा है वहाँ पे इनके लिए रमन्ना महर्षि के लिए, तुम वहाँ चले जाओ, तुमको वहाँ कुछ आंसर मिलेगा. So he said I went there and I sat down in his, उनकी जो सभा होती है उसमें, और वो कुछ बोलते ही नहीं थे. He was just sitting and this guy's like, you know, he was a journalist by profession, so he got very irritated, you know, that what kind of sadhu is this, he doesn't talk. So यहाँ तो मेरी दाल निकलने वाली. So he just got up all irritated and he left. And then he went around and round and round the whole India and all that. And the same thing happened to him. Towards the end of his journey, he got a little bit frustrated. He got a lot of, you know, things. So then one of the sadhus over there in the Himalayas told him, what are you doing here? So you want answers to your questions.